Good afternoon. Welcome to the 15th meeting of the year. Please rise and spend a few minutes greeting your fellow Rotarians and other guests. Okay. Please return to your seats and remain standing. And Paul PIROK will lead us with an invocation, pledge, and the national anthem.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Bill Sleeper had a suggestion that we pray for brevity in my prayer here, so before I get started though, I know that there's a card circulating for Howard Parker's family. If you haven't signed it yet, if you would please do so. If you would bow your heads in prayer with me. Dear God, we thank you for the seasons that give variety to our lives. As we enter the season of Thanksgiving, let us give our thanks for your many blessings. We're blessed to live in a country where we freely elect our leaders. We're blessed to live where we can freely express our opinions. And we're blessed not to live under the thumb of a repressive neighbor or regime. We're also entering the season of the Texas legislature. Please help our leaders to carefully guide our state and help them to remember to represent all of their constituents. And finally, help us to remember that some things have no season. Remind us in all seasons to listen more, understand more, compromise more, sacrifice more, and most importantly, serve more. Dear God, we thank you again for the ability to meet and to serve, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Amen. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What's
Thanks, Paul. It's now that time to share what joys we have and things we're happy about. Marilyn. Who's helping me out here? Tom. Here's your mic.
If I took all your cash out front and you don't have any now, I can keep track mentally of who owes the box funds, so don't hesitate.
Well, Tom, I don't have much money. I have $1.
We got most of it out there.
But, you know, I don't think I'm going to be able to buy a win for Baylor this weekend, but I'm hoping that will happen. So there we go.
Hope is what separates us from all the other animals in God's kingdom. So, who else? You got a Husky for us there, Cub? Let's see what you got. I'm just kidding.
My donation today is on behalf of Happy Franklin, where I am making her a member of the Navy League of the United States Dallas Council.
Wow. Where'd she go?
Who else? Marilyn. I love Marilyn. Marilyn loves me too. It's mutual, right?
However, my happiness today is addressed to our illustrious President, Jeff McNaughton.
Go Pokes.
When I first came, when Jeff first came to this club, it was football season, and I was wearing my wonderful orange and white Longhorn outfit, and he had on an orange and white shirt. So I gave him the hook 'em horn sign, and he said, "Oh, no, that's the wrong orange." So tomorrow, one of us is going to be in a happy place.
That is correct.
Because Oklahoma State and Texas play one another, and one of us is going to be happy. So here's a one for you, and here's a one for me.
And I will be happily at T. Boone Pickens Stadium to watch the war on the field.
Happy has happy bucks. Imagine that, folks.
I'm really happy to have 4 new ceiling fans that are really pretty.
Okay, anybody top that? All right.
So I was going to buy some raffle tickets, and I couldn't find my money, but guess what? I just found it. So, so my happiness is what a great job this Rotary Club did at the North Texas Food Bank on Saturday. Thank you all for being there. You did a great job.
And thank you for putting all that together. That's a lot of work, right? Who else?
Any other joys? Great, thanks for helping out, guys. That money that we raise through Happy Bucks goes to support not DISD, but University Park and Highland Park employees that we honor each month. And we get them a gift certificate to Maggiano's for a lunch. They used to come, but scheduling-wise, it's been difficult. So in the future, we're going to recognize them at the podium and then get them a gift certificate to Maggiano's. So it's that time to introduce those who are visiting us today. So if you're a guest, please stand and introduce yourself. Tom.
We have a lot of guests. I'm going to go to this one first, if I may. We have a very special guest here today. Jeff, would you introduce our guest?
I'd be happy to. Stand up, Vol. I'd like to introduce Vol Berezhny. Is that Berezhny? Vol Berezhny. I've been working on the pronunciation. He's visiting the DFW area from Ukraine. And so his family, he and his family are living in the Plano area, but he told me they visited several Rotary clubs, and I guess 3 is the charm. 3rd is the best, right? So welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm from Ukraine. My full name is Volodymyr Berezhny. I make it easy for Americans. Vol. I came with my family and 3 kids in January for travel, and I'm luckily stuck here in Texas. So thank you very much for accepting us. We live in Plano, and I'm visiting your club. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have 3 great guests today, and 2 of them just are going to be sending membership proposals today. So we have Kelly Pope on the end. She is Sergio Pope's wife. She's with SMU, and we're going to be submitting her app today. She is a very avid community volunteer in addition to working at SMU. We are very thrilled to have Sergio Pope in the membership hopper, and his process will be completed soon. So he's the retail banker and branch manager at Regions Bank. We're so happy to have you both. Thank you. I'm really thrilled to introduce Elisa Garcia, a longtime friend of mine in the junior league. She's visited our club a number of times, has volunteered with the North Texas Food Bank a couple times, so she's been an active volunteer with us. And so I just submitted her app 20 minutes ago. So welcome, Elisa. She is a professor with the Dallas Community College.
And I have 2 guests today. Senator Nathan Johnson, who will be our speaker a little bit later in the program, and his district director, Brenda Allen.
Back in the corner, Tom.
One more over here. Got a bunch of visitors today. We love visitors.
Oh. Hello, everyone. My name is Rita Malia Lalibo. I'm a visiting Rotarian from District 9141. That's in Africa, precisely Nigeria. I've been around for a year and 6 months in Dallas, and I've been having some difficulties attending fellowship because of the timing. I'm going to take a bit of your time. In Africa, we usually have a fellowship in the evenings and weekends. We only have one lunch fellowship, right? Mine club, the Rotary Club Port Harcourt South, is an evening fellowship. We meet every evening at 5:30 p.m. And so I got into Dallas, relocated to Dallas, trying to find a family, my Rotary family. And I found it very difficult because of the timing, the meeting, you know. And so for 2 weeks, I've been talking with the president, Jeff. I don't even know him in person, but we've been talking on the mail. And I was like, hey, I'd like to visit your club. And he said to me, oh, that would be great. But I'm not going to be around. I'll be in fellowship today. And I said, okay, I'd like to be welcomed by my president. And so I'm not going to come the week before, but I'm going to be here today. And I must say I'm very glad to be amongst my family. After like a year and 6 months without my family, I only do fellowship online with my club. I must say that I miss my club so dearly. My club and my president is aware that I'm fellowshipping with you here this afternoon. It's nice in Nigeria now, and they are gladdened. They want to see pictures of our fellowship, and I really feel at home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the guests that have visited us today. Eric Harrison will now come up and tell us who our marketplace advertiser is this week.
Thank you, President Jeff. Our marketplace advertiser today is Roach, Howard, Smith, and Barton, Karen Farris. RHSB is an independent insurance broker providing business insurance and risk management solutions to companies of all sizes and personal insurance to individuals and families. They have specialty expertise in technology, manufacturing, public entities, healthcare, directors and officers liability, and insuring high net worth individuals. One of the largest independently owned brokerage firms in Texas. RHSB is 70 years old, has offices in Dallas and Fort Worth, 65 plus employees, represents over 50 insurance companies. Their unique value proposition is that while they are independently owned, they are also part of Assurex Global, the largest privately held brokerage network in the world, allowing them to provide insurance and risk management to 5,000 plus clients throughout the world. Leroy Howard is one of the founding partners, and Karen Farris served as CEO for many years. Today she serves as the chair of their foundation. So for all of your insurance needs, please connect with Karen Farris, RHSB. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Eric. Now Roger is going to come up and tell us about a big meeting we have next week.
Okay. So I'm back and announcing again the program meeting that will occur next Tuesday. And you may not, I said it last week, but in case you weren't here, every member of our club is on the program committee. And you may wonder why, or you may think, I don't have anything to offer, but you're wrong, because each one of us have unique friends, family, and connections that once all together start discussing what triggers thoughts and ideas. And so your presence at this meeting is very important. It's next Tuesday, October 25th, 6 p.m. in the second floor meeting room of the Moody YMCA on Preston to decide our January through June programs. Pizza and cold drinks will be provided. If you want good programs, be part of deciding them. RSVP to Richard Stanford at hpumc.org. Anyway, he needs to know how many are coming to plan for food. So hopefully the email's in the bulletin. And in any case, come and the meeting will do important work. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. And also there was an announcement in the email you received yesterday. If you'll scroll down, it'll have Richard's email to RSVP. We look forward to everybody being there. Some big things coming up. Meadows Museum Tour will be Friday, November the 11th. You should be receiving a sign-up soon. I think that's what I saw earlier this week. I was out of town most of the week. So, Foot Care Project at Salvation Army, Saturday, November 12th. Dentistry with a Heart, November 19th. Tree lighting on November 20th. So a lot of stuff coming up. Scottish Rite Popcorn Packing, Thursday, December 1st. Salvation Army Distribution Center, Saturday, December 3rd. Holiday party and also celebration of C.C. Colley's 100th birthday. That will be December 15th at Lakewood Country Club. So you guys have heard all that. You'll be getting emails to sign up for that. So please sign up. I mean, we're service about self. We got a lot of events. Things are slow during the summer, but they really ramp up. So we really look forward to everybody participating in those events that they can attend. So we found out this week that our printer for the hub is no longer going to be printing the hub because they're no longer printing for anybody. So we are looking for a new printer. So if you have a contact at a printer that might be able to cut us a good deal, please let Betty Dawson or Lori Aldridge know. Betty has already done quite a bit of work and research in some of the printers in the area. But it's a really great piece that they put together, and it'd be nice if we had a printer that could help us out. So it's that time again, our weekly raffle drawing. Coming into this week, we had eclipsed $1,000. And for those that don't remember, each week we're doing a raffle, and we have a deck of cards, and if your raffle gets drawn, you will draw from this deck of cards. If you get the ace of spades, you get half the deck. I'm sorry, half the deck. You get half the pot. All ones? 1, 1, 1, 1. So if you get an opportunity to draw a card, if you draw the right one, you get half of the pot. If not, the pot will roll forward. You get to keep that card as a souvenir. Senator Johnson, would you mind drawing our raffle for the day? The last four numbers of the ticket is, not mine, 4318. Oh, I got it. What? She has to donate all the money to the foundation. All right. It's a match. Is this going to be the Alabama luck?
Yes. No.
Or Tennessee Vols luck?
Too much orange.
5 of clubs. So that card's removed, and each week the deck gets one less in there, so we're getting closer. Now up, Herb Hammond is going to introduce our speaker of the day.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be able to introduce my friend and colleague, Senator Nathan Johnson, who represents the 16th Senatorial District here in Dallas. As most of you probably know, Senator Johnson has been a senator since he was elected, I think, for the first time in 2018. And during the last 2 legislative sessions, he has introduced and gotten passed more than 60 bills with bipartisan support. And importantly, some of those bills relate to issues like reducing costs for health insurance, expanding palliative care services, assisting with teenage mental health services and getting those expanded, and restricting the sale of vaping products to minors. And those are just some of the most important things that he's done. Senator Johnson has a reputation down in Austin as someone who's extremely knowledgeable, someone who's very thoughtful, and someone who can get things done and work with people on both sides of the aisle. He is here today to talk to us about the 2023 legislative session and what we can expect. So please join me in welcoming Senator Nathan Johnson.
I want to thank Herb Hammond for allowing me to be here, my colleague at Holland and Knight. I want to thank Paul PIROK, who brought me here 2 or 3 years ago, who allowed me to come back after that experience. And thank all of you for allowing me to have this conversation. It's a very important one. I want to provide you with a little bit of an entertaining preview of what's to come in the session, but also encourage all of you. Audio levels good, Jeff? To encourage all of you to stay engaged throughout the session, whatever news source you prefer, read it and then read a different one, and try to keep track of what's happening at the state level. I have a huge chip on my shoulder when it comes to state politics because media generally covers what's happening in federal government. But the fact is the state government controls your education system, your highways, your water infrastructure, and many, many, many other things that affect your everyday life. In fact, a lot of the things that are done at the federal level don't get effectuated unless they happen at the state level. So I want to give you just a little preview of the biggest thing we have in front of us, then get into sort of the boring nuts and bolts details of the legislative session, and then wrap up with a concern I have, a generic concern that I want to say to all of you. I may say some things that are a little bit controversial. I try to keep things not all that partisan. We do live in a 2-party system, and occasionally things fall along party lines. And sometimes that causes damage. Generally, I don't lament the 2-party system so much because I believe in competition. I believe it in business. I believe it in competition in politics. And I often think that the best things are forged through competition of ideas. I do get concerned when one side always wins because I think then the quality of the ideas starts to fall down. So let's start with what is the biggest challenge any legislature can possibly face. Is it a budget deficit? No, that's easy. You just cut everything and say no to everything. And we're skilled at that because we have a cyclical economy and we very frequently faced budget shortfalls. And in some cases done very well, and I think we've had a conservative fiscal outlook in this state that generally has served us quite well because we do tend to have a cyclical economy. However, what's more difficult than a deficit is a surplus. Because surplus requires that you spend money responsibly. And there's another problem with the surplus. You can't just spend it any old way. If you create something new with this big pile of money, and it requires money next year, and the year after, and the year after, we might not have a surplus the next time the bill comes due. So we have to be careful with our money and not just go crazy with our $27 billion. Now, first of all, how did we wind up with an extra $27 billion? Our job each legislative session is to figure out how much money we expect to come in, spend most of it, set some aside in case things aren't as rosy as we thought. I don't know how many of you run a business, but can you imagine forecasting 2 years ahead for your budget cycle and committing to it? That is what we have to do, and so we have to have all sorts of precautionary things in place to make sure we don't blow it. So how did we get so far off? Our annual budget, our biennial budget is $250 billion. We're off by more than 10%. Why? COVID, mostly. COVID, the Texas economy came roaring back. The national economy came back pretty well, better than expected, but Texas in particular did great. So we have all this money that the comptroller didn't foresee us having. In addition, we have the plague of inflation, which does great for sales tax. Things cost more, it generates more sales tax revenue. That's coming into the state. The very high prices of oil and gas are generating enormous revenue through our state severance tax. So we had all these factors, you know, the inability really to predict we'd have this much money, together with inflation, together with high oil and gas prices, together with, I will say, underspending last session, leaves us with a giant pile of money. And it is a difficult, daunting task to figure out how to spend it responsibly. We actually have a constitutional limit on how much we can stuff away in the rainy day fund, also known more formally as the Economic Stabilization Fund. One thing to do would be to take it all and buy down property taxes. Another thing would be to stuff it all in the rainy day fund, but we'll need a constitutional amendment that you all will vote on in order to do that. Or we could figure out ways we can spend it that set us up for success in the future. We need infrastructure in this state. We've been coasting for a long time. We're somewhat under the illusion that all of our great decisions for the past 20 years have led to all of our prosperity. Some of our great decisions in the past 20 years have led to our prosperity. I think largely, whether it was Democrats running the state or Republicans running the state's been run pretty well. We can all complain about this or that, liberal thing or conservative thing, but generally we've had pretty good leadership. But I think our investments in fundamental infrastructure, I don't think, it's true, has fallen off in the past decade. Whether you're talking about physical infrastructure, and I mean roads, I mean water, and I mean an electrical grid, or social infrastructure, public education, and public health. And a third factor, systems. If you have physical infrastructure and social infrastructure, if you run an auto plant, you've got physical infrastructure, plant and equipment. You've got social infrastructure. That's your employees and their lunch breaks and their health benefits. But you need management. You need systems. That's the function of government. And we've actually underinvested in the governmental space. And I'm talking the government that processes your permits for a natural gas drilling well, the government that handles unemployment claims during a national shutdown, during a pandemic. These systems are struggling. We're using computers, mainframes from the 1980s. Agencies can't, I'm not even kidding. Agencies have to send faxes to each other because their data systems don't match up, because we've failed to. We had over $1 billion in requests from our agencies for updated equipment, and we gave them about $100 million. And we've got $27 billion left over. I passed a bill last session to teen mental health. It was really difficult to get $1.5 million. That is a speck of dust on my sleeve in our budget. To get $1.5 million to create a voluntary tier of mental health to attract the private sector to come in and provide acute care, generally for suicidal kids. It was a good bill, it had a lot of support, but I don't know, it cost a lot of money, $1.5 million. It was stripped off in a dark room in a conference committee. I don't really even know why to this date, but everyone fretted about the money, and we've got $27 billion left over. We are going to need to make some of these investments. It's not me, a Democrat. By the way, I'm a Democrat, first Democrat to represent the district, but I really try to be a productive person. I hope you'll read the Dallas Morning News endorsement. Their first sentence is, he's an independent thinker. And I really try to be. And I think it's important that we all be. So back to the budget and using our money wisely. If we don't invest in our infrastructure, we will not continue to have the success that we have right now. What is the wind at our back? Sunshine. Central location in the U.S., great airports, spectacular entrepreneurial spirit in this state, and that should never be discounted. It's unlike anywhere else in the country. We do attract people here. We've got enormous private capital, unlimited natural resources, and we've made great investments in things like our oil and gas sector and our green energy sector at the same time. And we're doing a lot of things right. We have a young workforce. We have a thriving higher education system. We got all these things. We really should be the best state in the nation. And if we don't continue to be to the for the next decade, into this following decade and the decade after that, it will be our fault. And so I guess I was thinking, like, don't take it from me, the Democrat. Take it from a more conservative group. Go to texas2036.com. It's led by Tom Luce, Margaret Spellings, who was the education secretary under President George W. Bush, good Texan, lives near a lot of us. They are concerned that if we don't make some infrastructure investments in water, electricity, public education, health, and many other things, by 2036, after 200 years of being founded as a state, we will not be in a good place. And they're doing something great, I think. They're ushering in what I'm calling empirical politics. They're gathering data, objective numbers, pulling it from wherever they can, trying to translate it into ways that people can draw it down and learn some lessons from it, irrespective of the party they're in, and making it available to legislators. I, for one, avail of it. I think they're doing good work. Not everybody likes their conclusions. I don't always like all of their conclusions, but by and large, they've got good, smart people working for them, and they are divorced from the world of politics and just trying to come up with good policy. If we can take that approach and spread it throughout the state and spread it throughout the legislature, we could really do some good things with our $27 billion. So we get back to that. What should we do with it? We should be investing in water. Probably over the next 20, 30 years, we will see more efficiency in our water consumption. Our water consumption will go up much slower than our population will, but it's still going to go up much faster than our water availability. We need to recharge dry aquifers. That's going to take some money. It's going to take some really good planning. But if we just take $6 billion and dump it on our water infrastructure, I'm afraid we'll screw it up, because we haven't been thinking about it for 50 years. What we could do is create a separate constitutionally recognized account and create a little institute of smart people from the private sector and from the private sector and the public sector, figure out how to spend this down over 6 years and really do some good. That's just one proposal out of my head. There's other people with other proposals. We can get together and work about it. But if we're willing to set aside some money, spend it slowly and wisely on areas that matter, like roads, like ports, like dredging, like education, like healthcare, I think we could really spend that money well. I'm also optimistic. As a legislative preview, one of the areas that has great bipartisan cooperation has been public education. I do think we will see more investments in public education. I hope and predict that we will see an increase in the basic allotment, the per student allotment that we pay for public education from state dollars. That's great, not just because it gives us an educated society, it also pulls down recapture. It also takes some pressure off of property taxes. Both of those things are really good. I expect that to happen. Where I'm concerned is when we get into issues like vouchers. You may support them, you may oppose them. I oppose them. I think it's actually not even a sincere approach to solving the problem. Why? I look around the country. I don't see any convincing data that has solved a problem anywhere. You might see a slight improvement somewhere with some populations where you've introduced vouchers. You'll see failures elsewhere. You will see undermining of public education systems. But more fundamentally, to me, there are a few things that we as a people still hold in regard as a common institution. We care about our country. We say the Pledge of Allegiance. We care about law enforcement and fire. We hate government uniformly. We feel good about that together. Public education is another one of those things that's one of our last great institutions. And I feel like if we say, you know what, can't do it. We have failed at educating our kids. We have a constitutional mandate in the Texas Constitution, shall provide for a free public education. And we give up. Let's just turn it over to the private sector. I don't buy it. So I will oppose them. I think rural Republicans will oppose them. I think urban Democrats will oppose them. And in between, we're going to have a difficult conversation. And I may be wrong. I've lost some battles before and the sky didn't fall. But you can see that, and if you want to be involved in a serious conversation, that's one to get involved in, and it's not one that has to be dictated by your partisan identity. Cover a few other topics, because I said I'd get into the boring stuff. I don't usually look at notes, and since my machine is dying, I won't look at them today either. There's a couple of areas that I've had the privilege to be involved in, and it was on purpose, but somewhat serendipitous. One is healthcare, the other is the grid. I'm trying to learn more about water, and I'm trying to learn more about public education. Those are areas where I rely on some of my colleagues. It's fun in the Senate, there's only 31 of us, and everybody has some expertise somewhere, and you can't possibly know everything. Believe me, there's a lot to know in any given day, and so you develop areas where you're good and you call on other people for certain things. Electricity and healthcare are areas where I've developed some expertise. In the healthcare space, it's another one that I'm optimistic that we can use some of the excess money well, including as our Texas economy continues to get stronger, we continue to have good state revenue. I think we're going to see some investments in some large investments in mental health. In defense of the legislature that's criticized for not putting enough money in mental health, it's been increased dramatically over the past few years, including great victory for Dallas. We finally got $243 million allocated to building a new state mental health facility last session. It wasn't easy, but we kept that money. So we do have a new state mental health facility. We are still really, really low on a national level for that investment. I think between the gun conversation and the fact that mental health is recognized as part of physical health, we will see some major investments on a bipartisan basis in mental health. Probably also in public health. It's probably not a secret to any of you that we have the highest rate of uninsured people in the nation. We have the highest number of uninsured people in the nation. That's sad on a moral level, on a civic level, and on a business level. It's really unproductive and it's quite expensive. We finally do have data from around the country showing that states that have opted to, I'm going to say it, expanded Medicaid, we've seen private health insurance rates fall. Costs for employers have fallen. We have more recent data that shows that property crime among the expansion population has gone down. And here's my favorite one. In Ohio, I think it's the only state that's measured this, the expansion population, the people who couldn't get health insurance before but were able to pick it up with Medicaid expansion, started volunteering more. Think about that. They finally were given something by the state, and I hate to use the word giving because it brings up that whole notion of cultivating dependence, but they were given the ability to stand on their own 2 feet, and so they went out and started helping in their community. There's also a positive correlation between having health care and being able to work, and if you structure this right, the bill I introduced for Medicaid expansion actually was patterned more after what Mike Pence did in Ohio. There's no work requirements. We're not going to say you have to have a job or we're not going to give you health care, partly because it has been shown not to be effective and partly because it's been declared unconstitutional like 6 times. But I did have something in there that says you're going to have to consult with the Texas Workforce Commission or some outsourced private employment counseling service so that we can tie health care to the incentive to work. I also offered a way for employers to contribute to an individual health savings account for people in the expansion population because I want it to mimic the real world. I want people who are on Medicaid to have an account and make their own choices with their own dollars about their health care. It was really a very conservative bill, and it failed, and it may fail again this session, but it may not. Why is it failing? It's failing, sadly, because of political inertia. It's failing because Republican leadership has opposed it for a decade, and they're having trouble getting out of the corner they painted themselves into. Now, I will tell you that business chambers around this state, business leaders around this state are sick of it, and they want it to happen. But it's still a politically very difficult problem, and so I could bang on tables and yell as a left-wing Democrat, you've got to help people. That's not very effective, at least it hasn't been for the last decade. How could this possibly be a win for the whole state? And here's where the art of politics is so interesting and fun, really. Gratifying if it works, and so far it hasn't. Why not expand Medicaid? The general argument, the short sentence is, Medicaid is a broken federal system and we shouldn't expand it. Never mind the fact that the data belies that. There's all kinds of problems with every federal program, tons of them, believe me. I don't have to convince you. But generally it does a pretty good job. But Medicaid is state administered. And this is state government, not federal government. And how we run our program is up to us. The fact that more physicians don't participate in it is because we have the lowest reimbursement rates of any state. We control that. We've got extra money. Let's incentivize doctors to participate. But how could you do that if you're a Republican who's opposed it just last year? How could you support it this year? You say it was a broken federal program, but we in Texas have amended the Medicaid program 63 times, that's a real number, over the past 8 years. We now have managed care organizations run by the private sector incentivizing good, healthy behaviors, incentivizing doctors to spend less money. It's now working because we Texans fixed it. So we Texans are going to have our own Texas Medicaid program, and we're bringing back our damn federal tax dollars back to Texas to make our population healthier and more productive for our employers. We win, right? We're close. We're getting there. I'll keep trying. Other things, I want to give you more of a preview of things that are supposed to, that we do expect to happen. In public education, I think we're going to see the allotment go up. We've talked about vouchers. That's a problem. School safety. One of the problems is we've directed schools to do a bunch of things, but we haven't given them extra money to do it. I expect there will be separate fiscal outlays so that schools can do the kind of things that we need to do to protect our kids from mass murderers. I like to remind everybody the very dark fact that no matter what we do to our schools, it's not going to stop all mass murderers because they can shoot kids as they get off the bus or when they go out for recess. Nevertheless, we should make our schools as safe as we possibly can while recognizing that we have a deeper, more fundamental problem. We're going to ban guns? No. 1, because that's stupid. 2, because it's against the Constitution. And 3, because it's Texas and it's not going to happen. Could we have a more intelligent conversation about it, though? Could, instead of repealing a permit to have a gun, we don't even need a permit. Anybody can go buy a gun. Yes, you have to have a background check, thankfully. We could expand those to include private sales. But what kind of message are we sending if we can't have a red flag law? If we can't raise the age to 21 to buy a machine gun? 19-year-old? I mean, I'm scared to give my kids a driver's license. I'm glad because they can pick up the orange juice, but still, that's fairly shocking. Now, I've heard the argument that it's unconstitutional against the Texas Constitution or with the federal Constitution. Forgive my ignorance. It's unconstitutional in one of these constitutions to raise the age to purchase a machine gun to 21. Since when has being unconstitutional blocked the Texas legislature from doing anything? I don't know what we're so upset about. Who's going to challenge that? Criminal justice, also one of my favorite issues to work because I really do like working when the partisan lines blur. And one of the most far-right think tanks does some of the best work on criminal justice. And I've worked with them, they've supported me, I've supported them. And oddly, there's some people in the middle that oppose it. But mostly when you look at the facts about prisoner reentry programs, we don't spend anywhere near enough money getting prisoners rehabilitated to reenter society because they come out here with no skills, no hopes, no money, and the only thing they know how to do is commit another crime, which they've perfected while in prison, okay? Some money well spent on that, and again, we've got very strong conservative support on this. I passed a bill my first session that did a little bit, but it got pared back till it cost almost nothing. I helped prisoners get their documents together. Right? But there's much more that we could do there. I do expect we'll get some money in there for prisoner rehabilitation. We're also examining stupid federal laws that fill up our prisons with people who aren't dangerous. I managed to get one of those repealed last session with full support on the right. There are other things that we can do, but no, we don't want a lawless society, so we want to be able to monitor that line. When are we getting too permissive, and when are we just being effective and efficient and realizing that we need more employees out there? Criminal justice, I actually am optimistic that things are going to get better, not worse. A couple other areas, and then I'll wrap up with one big scary thing. Get ready. Talked about the insured property taxes. We mentioned increasing the student basic allotment could bring down recapture rates, could bring down property taxes. That $27 billion is sitting there. I mentioned we could use it all or some portion of it. The governor suggested with great political wisdom that maybe we would use $15 billion of it, electoral wisdom, $15 billion of it to buy down property taxes. But we talked at the beginning about being fiscally responsible. If we if we compress your top property tax rates, my property tax rates, I got a big old bill. Ugh, turns me into a Republican every time I get my tax bills. If we use that much money to buy down these property taxes, next session, we're going to have to do it again. And the session after that, we're going to have to do it again. That's not an evergreen pot of money to buy down your property taxes each session. And so we'll have a choice to make when we hit a downturn. We're either going to have to fire a fourth of our teachers, or we're going to have to raise taxes some other way. I don't think that's fiscally responsible. Could we use some of the money Could we use some of it to bring down property taxes? I think that may be justified, particularly since we've had a real spike in the value of homes. I think that could be justified, but we did put a cap on the rate at which property taxes rise 2 sessions ago, and it has worked very well. The Texas Taxpayers Association has put the data forth. Personal incomes are rising faster than property taxes. Doesn't mean they're not really high. Doesn't mean we don't need to do something about it. So I'm okay with using some of the money, but I want you to consider one other thing we could do that might take some pressure off property taxes. Medicaid expansion. Your hospital district charges you taxes. It costs 6 times as much to treat somebody in a public hospital who is uninsured as to treat somebody who's insured. We are paying these costs at the hospital and in productivity. So that's one example. Other social problems that exist in our world that cost us a bunch of money, including incarceration and crime, are linked to failures to run an adequate system where people fall through the cracks. I'm not talking about liberal stuff. I'm talking about trying to make sure people don't fall through the cracks. I'm talking about being able to fund police. Maybe we could use some of the excess to create a grant program for cities to apply, like the city of Dallas wants to do, to build a new police training center. By addressing some social problems, we really can take pressure off of property taxes. Can't get rid of them. And so that's the final point I want to make about taxes. One of the plans is to keep using sales tax dollars to buy down property taxes. Just pause there for a second. Sales tax dollars are not the same as property tax dollars. If we buy down property taxes with this surplus, it'll be sales taxes, fines, fees, and severance taxes to give tax relief to poor people and wealthy people. But it's all sales tax dollars. Those are not property tax dollars. When it comes to our schools, if we phase out property taxes altogether, which is the stated goal of some people, we're going to be funding everything off of basically a one-legged stool. And when we're in a downturn, where's the money for the schools going to come from? We've cut school funding before. I do not want to see it happen again. There's something good about having the stability of property taxes fund our public school system. There's something good about property taxes telling the whole community, you're investing in living in an educated society, and specifically an educated community in your backyard. So I don't want property taxes to disappear. We don't have an income tax. I don't think we need one if our property tax system and our sales tax system is working well. But let's keep that in mind as we all are so grumpy about paying our property taxes. It costs to live in an educated, functioning society. I'm actually optimistic that next session we'll be able to get a lot of great work done. Let me tell you where I'm concerned. I'm concerned, you may find this odd, about the expansion of government. I don't mean more employees. I think we have a fairly feeble government right now that can't live up to the responsibilities that it has to the businesses and to the people of the state, because we don't pay people enough. We have an attrition rate at the Texas Juvenile Justice Department of 70%. They make a little bit, I think 50 cents an hour more than the local Buc-ee's starting salary. This is not sustainable. It's not that we have too many employees in our government. We may have too many agencies. We may have all sorts of regulatory snafus that I'd love to clear out. I've cleared some out already. I'd love to work with you if there's some regulatory hurdles. I'm talking about invasive government. And we can talk about it on a personal level. I don't want to give a talk on abortion here. But I do want to say that all of us should consider, whether it's abortion or some other social issue, we all have very, very firm beliefs on these things. And they're very different. And there are moral people who hold different convictions on these things. And as those convictions get more and more profound, I think the government maybe ought to take further and further away from it. A larger government will go in and declare them based on whoever controls the levers of power at that moment, which may or may not represent the majority. And we were founded on a constitutional democracy that is supposed to protect individuals from majoritarian tyranny. So I am a little concerned, not based on my views on social issues, that the government comes in and makes too many rules about social issues. It starts to become a business issue. So what I'm hearing on the subject of abortion, for example, major companies call me and say, is my board of directors going to face criminal liability if our company health insurance pays for a woman to travel out of state for an abortion? Not today, or maybe it does, because we've hearkened back now to a 1922 law that arguably might hold somebody on a board of directors of a corporation criminally liable for an abortion if a woman leaves the state. Whoa, now we're getting way far afield, and we're talking about next session making it more explicit in the law. Let's get away from the ugly, sticky social issues and talk about some pure business issues. ESG, woke ranting by financial service companies about green energy or not investing in guns. That made Texas mad. So 2 bills were passed last session, anti-boycott bills. If you boycott the energy industry, the Texas fossil fuel industry, or if you boycott gun manufacturers, we're kicking you out as a matter of doing business with our state. I'm talking about financial service companies that would underwrite bonds for a city, $500 million bonds. I'm talking about Fidelity. I'm talking about Bank of America, PNC Bank, BlackRock, major institutions that we don't want to see leaving our state. We created a bad boy list, or bad girl list, bad kid list, of companies that boycott fossil fuels. Strangely, BlackRock is on there. BlackRock has close to $2 billion of money, some of its own money, tied up in the fossil fuel industry in Texas. They don't boycott fossil fuels. They do have some funds that are ESG that appeals to investors who would love to boycott fossil fuels. Their CEO has said some things that sound against fossil fuels, and that really hurt our feelings, I guess, so we passed a law about it. And we did it with guns too. There's another list. I gotta say, our comptroller's office did a great job of minimizing the damage. They created 2 lists. If you're a big financial services company and you have 200 funds, and one of them is all super woke ESG, they put that one on a separate list because it's a separate LLC, and they don't get to play in Texas. Okay, fine, that's not that big a deal. But the whole umbrella company, the other 200 funds, they still get to play. There's only one US company on the super bad kid list that's really in trouble, and that's BlackRock, despite their $2 billion investments in oil and gas. What I'm hearing, the legislative preview, is that next session, we're gonna make it more stringent. That if you do business with a company that is on the super bad kid list, you're on the super bad kid list. In fact, while we're at it, if you do business with a company that has a fund that's on the bad kid list, you're on the bad kid list. Okay, this is getting ridiculous. This is big government invading the private sector. And I took one of very few votes against that bill, and people said, oh, that was a terrible vote for you. You're gonna look, what am I gonna look like, a liberal? I don't like the state interfering with private business judgment. So I'm seeing a pattern of this. You know we're still in a state of emergency right now? From a governmental level, Chapter 418 of the Government Code allows a state of emergency, gives extraordinary powers to a mayor or a county judge or a health authority or the governor, gives them special extraordinary powers. We have a weak governor system in Texas. For a year and a half, the governor has declared emergencies every month. It allows him to move giant chunks of money around, billions of dollars that normally need the blessing of the legislature. You may or may not agree with the way those chunks of money are being moved around, but I believe in separation of powers. And for him to be able to declare an emergency, a COVID emergency, he didn't take COVID that seriously in the first place. So I'm not sure what we're doing here other than undermining our constitutional principles. The Senate Bill 8, again, I hate to come back to abortion, whatever about the abortion issue, Senate Bill 8, aside from the social issue it addressed, it created a way to evade judicial review. Separation of powers, checks and balances. We have the governor usurping the powers of the legislature. We have the legislature usurping the powers of the courts. And we will see more of this stuff. In California, they're using it for liberal stuff. These kinds of trends, I think I have an obligation to not just monitor, but to present to you, to make you aware of, and so that we all can take a watch on it. And don't be complacent if what's happening, you actually like what's happening. Look at the process too. Because if the who's in power changes, you probably will not want our system of checks and balances to erode. So, wrapping it up, I see someone standing over here. I am really much more positive, and I love my job far more than it might appear. But I think it's important, even during good times, for all of us to stay engaged. Hold your government accountable. Whatever party they're in, whatever office they're in, you're smart, engaged people, really value your input, including at my office. So you're welcome to come see me anytime. Thank you for letting me talk to you today. I think questions are, yes, thank you, sir.
Hold on.
Oh.
Hold on. Yeah, you do.
The fate of our Texas electric grid.
Oh, the fate and the state, I think we'll talk about, right? The state of the electric grid is it is much better than it was 2 years ago, which is good because for 10 years we kind of ignored some problems until they got really bad and then a storm caught us. We did have cheap electricity for 20 years and that was great, but it came at a very steep price. And I think it was a bad compromise. Great work was done during the legislature. It's been criticized a lot that we didn't do enough. I mean, we had 60 days of a bunch of people who really don't know anything about electricity. I learned as fast as I could. We've weatherized our generators. We're in the process of weatherizing our critical gas facilities. We've mapped out where they are. The TDUs now know whose power to cut off and not to cut off. We're not going to hit that cycle of that cascade, catastrophic cascade. We've changed market mechanisms. We're really in a better situation despite a FERC report that came out yesterday that says you guys are still screwed. I don't think we are. We're still vulnerable, and it's still not where it needs to go. So what needs to happen is we need to tighten up our markets. We're going to have to completely redesign the incentives that are built into our markets. Free markets are managed things, right? It's really free market forces. The PUC is working on plans to redesign the market. They're not being released before the election. They're going to be released shortly after the election on November 17th. Tune in live, the hearing, the Business and Commerce Committee. I expect to hear a discussion about the grid. I'm hopeful that it's going to be fine, but it's going to take some time. And electricity prices probably will stay high for a while. I'd like to talk any longer conversation anybody wants to have with me over that. It's very complex, very interesting, and very important.
So
Yes,
quickly, I'm from Ukraine, so I kind of have a fresh look to things here, and my kids went to public schools. I have 3. And I'm very I'm blessed to be here, and thank you. This is an amazing state. We are really blessed as a family to be here, and very thankful. So my question is what I see in public school, and I'm from teachers' families. Amazing teachers, right? And I live in Plano, so great schools. What about food? You talked about public system and infrastructure, so I'm curious about the food is not perfect. In Ukraine, we have better food for kids. So can you comment on that? Because you are a rich state.
I love that comment.
I think there is a room for improvement.
Yeah, we're feeding these kids garbage. That was my first failed entry into politics. I tried to get the menu changed at my local kindergarten public school. What about that? Man, I hope we get a few more voices like yours. I'd love to improve the quality of food in our public schools. And there is a correlation between the food that's served, the food that's consumed, and academic performance. It's a bigger deal than people think. So I'll bring that to the Education Committee. I'm going to tell them to call you. We're going to have you testify. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Talking about energy, a couple of months ago, I was on a cross country in North Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. I was super surprised how many windmills there are now, and I understand the cost associated with energy from windmills is much higher than oil production. And is that the trend? Is that where we're headed? And a couple other things on. A couple of years ago, I was at a gun show. I bought a new gun, had a background check. I bought a used gun. There was no background check. That surprised me. And the last question is, you passed 60 bills in the last couple of years. Which bill or 2 bills are you the most proud of?
Wow, those are 3 great questions.
That's too many, Tom. I'm sorry.
In 30 seconds. The first one, the windmills costing more to produce energy, that's one of those really pernicious, pure falsehoods, just absolute garbage, false. In fact, what we're dealing with in the legislature is the fact that wind energy is so cheap, it has driven gas and coal production out of business. That the reason our grid is unstable is because we actually have so much energy coming from renewables. You won't hear me say we have too much renewable energy because it's also been a huge boon to our industrial sector. It's created tons of jobs. The renewable energy has been a great benefit to Texas, but it is true that it's so cheap, in part due to federal subsidies, in part just because it's cheap once it's built. It's not dispatchable. When the wind stops blowing, you don't have any power, right? And until we have enough batteries to capture the wind when the wind is blowing, we're going to need stuff that turns on quickly, which is nuclear and natural gas. We're not going to build any more nuclear plants. I mean, maybe somebody will figure out a way to. So we're looking at ways to incentivize the construction of quick start natural gas plants or batteries, which are coming on right now, and conservation measures. It's really about the portfolio. It's not a question of how much renewables we have. It's do we have enough right now, turn it on energy, or enough ways to shut down energy that's being called upon so that we all can still cook our food and heat our homes and not die. So that's the energy question. I remember the third one, the gun. You didn't have to get a background check when you purchased a used gun. Yeah, that's called a loophole, and I think it ought to be closed. I actually had a guy wearing a MAGA hat and an NRA t-shirt come up to me and tell me that we needed more gun regulation. It was a fascinating conversation. He just thinks he's a very, very responsible gun owner. I suspect you are too. So I think there are a number of things that the vast majority of gun owners would support that just ensure that you have responsible people owning weapons. and I'd be happy to talk with you more about that too. I don't want to interfere with your right to have 1 gun or 10 guns. I want to make sure that people have them and that they use them and store them responsibly. Bill I'm most proud of, partly because of its sneakiness and partly because it actually did some good. There was a bill last session that's extremely arcane, an idea I got. I mentioned Texas 2036 earlier. You know, I wanted to expand Medicaid and pick up 1 million people. Well, that's a pretty heavy lift. There was another idea that was actuarially predicted to pick up 200,000 people and help them get private health insurance on the market, actually buying it. The thing is, we're going to buy it with federal dollars. Essentially what we did in the way I sold the bill, it's very complex. I forgot how it works. But I know that, I'm serious, it's really complex. I know that we were able to pull down some power from the federal government and bring it to Texas, and in turn re-regulate some certain products on the insurance market, which triggered a cascade of additional federal subsidies to Texas, which allowed 200,000 people to buy health insurance for close to $0, and it worked. And I got a very conservative Republican friend of mine in the House to carry it. Between the two of us, we were able to navigate the last 2 weeks of session are just pure carnage. It's Republican against Democrat, it's House against Senate, it's Republican against Republican, Democrat against, it's just a bloodbath of bills. And it took constant monitoring and texts at 4 in the morning, don't kill that bill, that's mine, right, back and forth. I'm proud of it because of what it did, because of how we presented it, and because of the political realities of getting anything passed in the legislature sometimes, and we pulled it off. So it was a great experience.
Senator, thanks for being here. Border security, it's political fodder during a year like this, a re-election year. Is it as bad as we hear?
First disclaimer, I'm not an expert on the border. And I guess it depends on what you mean by bad. There's objective numbers. The number of people coming here is the number of people coming here. It's way up. It's huge. It's tremendously up. It's manifold up. I personally don't think it has to do with who's in office. If you go back, Democrat, Republican, Republican, Democrat, I think the whole thing stems from 50 years. It's like our grid. At any given moment, it all seemed fine until a crisis hits, and then you realize, oh, God, I guess we should have been paying attention to this for about, I think Reagan was the last president to really do anything productive and significant with border policy. George W. Bush tried to, nobly, and he was rejected by his own party. So we pretty much haven't done anything. Barack Obama comes along and deports more people than any president in history. Trump invokes a pandemic bill to try to keep people out, which kind of arguably can't be used anymore. And meanwhile, Latin America is hemorrhaging. It's collapsing, and those people are coming here. And they're coming from Venezuela, where they're suffering under a totalitarian regime. I don't feel it's as bad as other people do because it doesn't scare me that much. I do think it's a real issue. It's a serious, significant issue. I do believe in spending Texas dollars on the Texas border. I don't think we should be spending 5 billion Texas dollars on the Texas border when we used to spend 225 million, when we raised it to 1 billion last session, and then with a last couple of days, basically with a request from the governor's office, we took it from 1 billion to 3 billion in 3 days. 3 days. We don't have any idea how we're going to spend that money. Now that we're at 3 billion, I talked about, powers under an emergency. Over the last couple of years, because it's a political issue, we've taken another $1 billion out of other agencies and stuffed it into the Texas Border Patrol, and it's not all that effective. Now we're looking at another billion. We're going to be at $5 billion. That's some real money. I do believe that we have a problem at the border, and we ought to be addressing it. And I do believe that the Biden administration has failed. I don't like how Trump handled it, but we've not taken down one brick of wall. We've not reduced our enforcement of the border at all. It's just increased. It's a sad state of affairs that needs a lot of attention. It needs grown-up conversation.
Senator Johnson, thank you for being here today. A book will be placed in the McShann Elementary Library in your honor.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here, really.
Next week, Norman Alston will be speaking about funding a new convention center, and John Brown will be our chair. Paul PIROK will lead us in the four-way test.
Me again. If you would join me in the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? beneficial to all concerned. Have a great weekend.
But I mean, everybody was, I didn't see anybody get up and they were he did. I mean, really.
All right, how do we open this thing up?
All right. So, you got one. Just send it. Just send it out. Say.
I'm gonna send it to Lori because she's got something she wants to send out for a vote too, so she's gonna send it to me at the same time.
Just say that you move and I second.